Hello, Beth Sholom. My name is Dan Glass, and I'm the head of school at the Brandeis School of San Francisco, where we have many Beth Sholom students and families. And I have had the good fortune of praying in your synagogue on a number of occasions, and I look forward to doing that again when this moment we're in right now is behind us. And I'm here with the take-home Torah this week. I was invited to share this with you this week, and I was thrilled at the invitation. I'm super excited to share some thinking with you, actually. It's very much about this moment that we're in right now. So this week's Parsha is Tazria-Metzora, and it deals with the laws of purity and impurity, including expansive detail about a skin disease of some sort known as Tzara'ath. Now, unless you're interested in biblical dermatology, this might not sound like a super interesting subject matter to dive into for dozens of verses. And Tazria-Metzora kind of has a reputation for being the parsha that people try to schedule their bar bat mitzvah around to avoid. After all, the only people who are less inclined to talk about skin lesions than the general population are adolescents. But I actually jumped at the opportunity to share some thinking this week with the Beth Sholom community about this portion because it has so much resonance with this moment we find ourselves living through. Tazria-Metzora deals in questions of quarantine and cleanliness and isolation, words that have become profoundly present in our lives this past year, whose meanings have been reshaped by our daily attention to them since the arrival of COVID-19 in our world. Much of this week's portion is taken up with the details of how one manages impurity, how many days of isolation, what kinds of sacrifices will be required to set things right, and so on. There's a somewhat magical realist element to the Parsha as well, with this skin disease seemingly able to afflict inanimate objects like clothing and homes. That leads to an interesting tangent into what to do with garments that become impure due to contact with the disease. Largely, the solution was to burn them, which brought me back to the earlier days of our current pandemic, when we were sanitizing our groceries and packages and letting them sit apart untouched for days until we judged the lentils pure enough to be put on our shelves with their brethren. I have vivid memories of our garage floor strewn with Costco items and our own uncertainty as to whether or not they could safely be brought into our home. It's a reminder that all unfamiliar diseases can feel supernatural when they enter into our daily lives. Another interesting tangent from Baba Metzia in the Talmud here is the question of how to determine purity. The question of the impact of whether this skin disease shows up first as a bright spot on the skin or as a white hair on the skin is taken up by the Heavenly Academy. And what's fascinating about the little interaction that's accounted for here is that the Heavenly Academy and God do not see eye to eye. God says that if the bright spot shows up first, then a person should be considered clean, whereas the Heavenly Academy rules the reverse, that a person would be deemed unclean. And so they actually call upon a living rabbi, Rabbah Namani, who is, quote, preeminent in the laws of Sa'ara and tense. And I just have to wonder what the course of study was like for that rabbi to become a preeminent scholar in those specific areas. And that rabbi with his dying breath sides with God that the person would be considered clean. I appreciate this little Talmudic moment for two reasons. First, I'm grateful as an educator for the profound message about wrestling with ideas contained in the fact that the Jewish tradition includes open arguments with God. And second, I see in this anecdote a reflection on this moment when many of us in our own lives have bristled at the safety precautions or lack of safety precautions being taken by peers or neighbors or family members. It's a reminder that purity is a hard thing to judge, even in the highest courts. So as I was reading Tazria-Metzora, I found myself curious about the Hebrew word for quarantine. In the text, the word badad is used, which is a root word that means to be isolated, divided, or alone. And certainly, I think that resonates. We've all disappeared into our homes this past year, and loneliness has pervaded our communities. I use that word disappear advisedly. It harkens back to me to a beautiful song that was very much a part of my family's life this past year by a group called Christina and the Queens. The song is called People I've Been Sad, and I'm gonna make full use of our technological connection here and share a snippet of this song with you. So here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Christine and the Queens.
It's true that people have been sad. It's true that people have been gone. It's true that people have been missing out. And missing out for way too long. It's just that me, myself, and I been missing out for way too long. Been taking calls I should have been missing out. Forsaking things for way too long. Ooh, if you disappear, then I'm disappearing too. You know the feeling, you know the feeling.
I hate to have to turn off that song because I love it so much. So that song was released this last year, and actually it's not about the pandemic per se. It was written about the lead singer's mother's death and sort of her experience in the wake of her death. But I think it speaks very much to the sense of isolation that so many of us feel, and even just that recording of the singer sitting in her apartment window in Paris very much resonates. That refrain, though, is one that has really haunted me. If you disappear, then I'm disappearing too. You know the feeling, you know the feeling. We've known a different kind of isolation than we might have ever imagined possible these past 13 months. We have disappeared too. We know the feeling. But at the same time, this entire practice of ritual purification described in this parsha is very much about connection. It's about creating a space in which it is safe for people to gather, where the disease that is harming individuals in the community can be kept at bay. When all of this first started, one of the first poems I thought of, and for those of you who know me know, poetry is a primary mode of thinking and engaging for me, was from this book by Juliana Spar called This Connection of Everyone with Lungs. And I'm gonna read just the first little section of this poem here. So it begins, and the section of the poem is called Poem Written After September 11th, 2001. There are these things: cells, the movement of cells and the division of cells, and then the general beating of circulation, and hands and body and feet, and skin that surrounds hands, body, feet. This is a shape of blood beating and cells dividing. But outside of this shape is space. There is space between the hands. There is space between the hands and space around the hands. There is space around the hands and space in the room. There is space in the room that surrounds the shapes of everyone's hands and body and feet and cells and the beating contained within. There is space, an uneven space made by this pattern of bodies. This space goes in and out of everyone's bodies. everyone with lungs breathes the space in and out, as everyone with lungs breathes the space between the hands in and out. Then it goes on a bit from there. As everyone with lungs breathes the space between the hands and the space around the hands and the space of the room and the space of the building that surrounds the room and the space of the neighborhoods nearby and the space of the cities in and out. So obviously Juliana Spar is articulating a kind of basic interconnectedness of humanity here, but she's really one of my favorite contemporary poets, and she often works in this kind of a creative mode, building up layers of meaning and experience. These lines here take me back to my family's first tentative ventures into the world last March and April. First our yard, then the streets around our home, then the broader neighborhood, then back in the car for the first time in what felt like ages. And in all of that motion, what this poem invites us to recognize is a fundamental connectedness. There's a lineage in American poetry that Spar's work also traces, a lineage of radical inclusion, a kind of awareness of connection that insists that each of us is connected at a cellular, atomic, I might even say spiritual level. These poems often share a formal mode of extending the poetic line to and even past its breaking point, long winding verses packed with people and ideas. We see this explored in Bernadette Mayer's feminist work, in Allen Ginsberg's Queering of America, and it likely begins, I would say, with Walt Whitman and his reminder in Song of Myself that every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I find myself thinking of such radical inclusion this week as the Derek Chauvin trial unfolds, as another Black man loses his life over the weekend to police violence in the Twin Cities, as we consider anew who we are connected with as American Jews or American citizens, or as human beings who believe that all people are created in the image of God. I think of Ta-Nehisi Coates' reminder in this wonderful book, Between the World and Me, to be skeptical of secondhand answers. A reminder that the work of building a more just society is the work of constant questioning, questioning as ritual, questioning as exploration, rather than the search for certainty. This, I believe, is the hard work of questioning that we have to engage in as a nation. We're on the precipice of ending our isolation, of reaching herd immunity, of being judged pure and returning to the community. What rituals of purification should we engage in so that the safe space we build, so that the society we rebuild after this pandemic is truly safe for every person, regardless of their skin color or gender expression or natural or national origin? How can our poetic line, our Jewish and American community include as fully human, equally and endlessly worthy, every atom, every cell, every breath? I hope this question, an argument for the sake of heaven perhaps, worthy of wrestling with angels over, sparks some thinking in your homes or your souls this Shabbat. I want to thank you for the opportunity to think together here. May you find and continue to find safety and connection in the days and months ahead. Shabbat Shalom.